My name is Dana Ruiz. I'm 25 years old, married to a man who still brings me coffee in bed on Sundays, and until 3 months ago, I believed I had finally proven myself in the one place that never believed I belonged, Harper & Lennox, a sleek mid-sized tech firm nestled in downtown Boston. I started at Harper & Lennox when I was barely 21, fresh out of college with a business degree, a resume full of unpaid internships, and a desperate need to pay rent. They hired me as an assistant. Entry level, lots of room for growth, they said in the interview. I believed them. For a while, I even felt grateful. But gratitude fades when it's never reciprocated. Over the next 4 years, I clawed my way up to operations coordinator, then manager. I made myself indispensable, not just by doing my job, but by doing everyone else's when they dropped the ball. I became the one who quietly fixed things, who remembered the details that others forgot, who stayed late when no one asked and came in early when no one noticed. Then came the Whitestone Logistics project. It was supposed to be our golden goose, a multi-million-dollar logistics software implementation for a huge national client. High pressure, high stakes. And Marcus Trent, my direct supervisor, was handed the reins. Marcus had a reputation in the office. He was polished, loud, and charming in the way that made executives think he was competent. And maybe he was once. But somewhere along the line, he stopped being a leader and started being a professional delegator. I wasn't just looped into the project. I was asked to run operations. That meant timelines, internal coordination, vendor management, and client follow-ups. All while Marcus floated from meeting to meeting, talking strategy but rarely offering solutions. He dropped deadlines like hot potatoes and ignored escalation emails until I had to clean up the mess. Once, I caught him pitching a timeline to the client that didn't even reflect our internal resource constraints. I had to scramble and revise every single department's workload within 24 hours just to keep us on track. I thought he'd thank me. He didn't even notice. Still, I kept my head down. I worked 60-hour weeks. Missed dinners with my husband. Slept with a notepad by the bed because my brain refused to stop running through action items. And we delivered. We launched Whitestone on time. Under budget. With near-perfect client feedback. I even received a private thank you email from their COO, which I printed and kept in my drawer like a lifeline. The Monday after the rollout, we had an all-hands meeting. I assumed it was to recognize the team. My chest even fluttered a little when Marcus called everyone into the conference room. He stood at the front, beaming, sleeves rolled up like he'd personally wired the back end himself. That project, he said, was a triumph of leadership and foresight. We took a risk and delivered. I want to thank everyone who supported this vision, but ultimately, success like this comes from the top down. Support. He called me support. No mention of my name. No credit to my team. No acknowledgement that I'd built the entire operational framework that saved his strategy from collapsing. Afterward, I stayed behind. Marcus, I said, keeping my voice level, can we talk? He turned with that smarmy, over-rehearsed smile. Sure, what's up? I want to be direct. I ran the operations for Whitestone. And I think it's important for morale that we're clear about who did what. His smile thinned. Dana, I appreciate your passion. But part of being a team player is letting leadership lead. Clients don't want to hear from middle management. That word again. Middle management. Like I was some faceless cog in a machine he built. That's when something inside me shifted. I went back to my desk and pulled out a blank notebook. From that day on, I started documenting everything. Every discrepancy. Every meeting where he took credit for my work. Every last-minute task he dumped on me, along with the emails and Slack messages that proved it. At first, I didn't know what I was gathering evidence for. But something told me to be ready. And then, the whispers started. There was a promotion coming up, senior operations manager. It was my logical next step. I had the experience, the metrics, the performance reviews. Even HR had hinted at it during my last check-in. I was so certain. I told my husband to keep our Friday night open. I was sure we'd be celebrating. Instead, Thursday afternoon, Marcus asked me to step into his office. I remember the look on his face. Calm. Casual. The way someone looks when they've already won. There's been a change, he said, handing me a sleek envelope. We're restructuring. Unfortunately, your role is being dissolved. Tomorrow will be your last day. I didn't speak at first. I couldn't. Is this a joke? I finally said, my voice low, trying not to shake. You're firing me? After I ran the most successful project this company has seen all year. He shook his head like I was being dramatic. It's not personal, Dana. Just business. Restructuring happens. But I knew. There was no restructuring. This wasn't about budget. It was about eliminating the one person who had the receipts. The one person who could show the executives that Marcus Trent wasn't the reason Whitestone succeeded. I cleared my desk that evening. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. But as I walked out of Harper & Lennox for the last time, my notebook was tucked under my arm. And I wasn't going to stay quiet. The Monday after my last day at Harper & Lennox, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in years. The silence was both freeing and suffocating. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee my husband had placed on the nightstand. Mark had been supportive through the whole thing. Furious, yes, but calm. You don't need them, he kept saying. They'll regret it. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But part of me couldn't shake the sting. I'd given that company everything. And now I was jobless, reputation dented, and worst of all, erased. Or so Marcus thought. That morning I opened the notebook. The same one I'd used to document every missed deadline, every redirected email, every manipulation. I flipped through page after page, organized neatly by date. I had backup too. Screenshots, copies of project timelines, budget approvals with my name on them. I stared at it all, wondering what to do. Go public? Post a tell online? Email the execs? It didn't feel right. Not yet. Instead, I did what any strategic planner would do. I researched. I pulled up the company's org chart, looked through LinkedIn, tracked down who had left recently, quietly messaged 3 former Harper & Lennox employees I'd been friendly with over the years. I didn't mention Marcus by name. I just asked if they'd ever experienced anything off. By noon, 2 of them had responded. One of them, Jane, had been a project manager. She messaged back, "Are you talking about Marcus? Because I have stories." That sentence alone felt like someone had reached through the screen and lifted some of the weight off my chest. We set up a call that night. Jane didn't hold back. "He did the same thing to me," she said, her voice low but firm. "I ran point on a product revamp last fall. He gave me full control, then took credit when it launched. Didn't even mention my name during the board presentation. I asked her what happened after. He pushed me out. Started excluding me from strategy meetings. Wouldn't answer my emails directly. Then one day, HR called me in and said my position was being absorbed into another department. Sound familiar? It was like looking in a mirror. She wasn't the only one. Over the next 2 days, I heard from 4 more people. All women. All with similar stories. Marcus delegating, demanding, then discarding. Some were too afraid to speak publicly. One had signed an NDA after her severance package. I felt something shift in me then. It wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time betrayal. Marcus was building his career on top of the people he crushed. And I'd had enough. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in a while, Anya, a former internal recruiter who now worked for a rival firm. She picked up on the first ring. "Dana? Wow, it's been a minute. I need to ask you something," I said, my voice trembling. "Did you ever hear rumors about Marcus Trent? About him pushing people out?" Anya went quiet. After a pause, she said, "Off the record? Yeah. But no one ever had proof. Just a lot of disappearances." I told her I had proof. The next day, Anya introduced me to one of her contacts, a freelance journalist who specialized in workplace misconduct. Her name was Erin, and she had this calm, measured way of asking questions that made you want to spill everything. I met her at a coffee shop downtown, notebook in hand. We talked for 2 hours. I showed her the documentation, the emails, the messages from other former employees who were willing to speak anonymously. At the end of it, Erin closed her laptop and said, "This is more than enough for a story. But I need to verify some things. If I can get corroboration from at least 2 others, I'll pitch it by Friday." By the time I got home, I had messages from both Jane and another former colleague, Trina, saying they'd spoken with Aaron. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the glow of my laptop screen. My career at Harper & Lennox was over. But Marcus? He'd just started a new mentorship initiative for young female professionals. The audacity! I stared at the screen for a long time, then clicked open a blank email. To hr@harperlennox.com. Subject: Whistleblower documentation. Formal complaint regarding Marcus Trent. I attached the files, the emails, the timelines, the client feedback with my name on it. And I hit send. My hands were shaking. But for the first time since that awful meeting in his office, I felt something else. Clarity. He thought he could erase me, bury my work, fire me quietly. He didn't know I kept the receipts. 3 days after I sent the email to Harper & Lennox's HR, I received a reply. It was cold, professional, almost robotic. Thank you for your submission. We take all concerns seriously and will conduct a thorough review. Due to confidentiality policies, we are unable to share the details of any investigation. Regards, HR Department. That was it. No follow-up questions. No invitation to speak further. Not even an acknowledgement of what I'd shared. I read the email 3 times, each time feeling the words land heavier. It was the kind of response designed to make people back down, to close the door before it could be pried open. A corporate shield masquerading as concern. But I wasn't backing down. Erin, the journalist, called me that afternoon. "They're stonewalling you," she said. Textbook. But the good news is I've got the green light from my editor. The story's going live next week. My breath caught. Seriously. She sounded cautious but resolute. It won't name you unless you agree to it. But it will name him. And it will detail every verified instance we've collected. I sat down on the edge of my bed, hand over my mouth. "They're going to try to discredit you," she warned gently. "Be ready for that. If this hits hard, they'll spin it." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I've been spun before, but not like this. Not on my terms. That weekend, I told my parents everything. I hadn't told them about the firing, or the story, or even the project that sparked it all. They listened in stunned silence. My mom's hands folded tightly in her lap, my dad frowning like he wanted to drive to Marcus's house himself. "But honey," my mom finally said, "are you sure it's worth it? Going public like this? Won't it make it harder to find another job?" I looked her in the eye. "It might. But it's already hard. It's always hard when you're honest." Mark squeezed my hand. "They won't scare her. Not this time." Monday morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. I opened my messages and there it was, Aaron's article. Top of the business section. Headline in bold, "The Quiet Erasure. How one manager built his career by undermining women." My name wasn't in the opening paragraph, but I recognized every detail. She'd written it like a narrative. Marcus Trent's swift rise through Harper & Lennox, peppered with anonymous quotes and confirmed documentation. The Whitestone Project was there. So was the quote from the COO that I'd saved, and the screen grab of the timeline that still had my initials. Jane and Trina's testimonies were interwoven carefully, anonymously. Erin had done her homework. The story read like truth, because it was. Within hours, the company issued a statement. Harper & Lennox is committed to maintaining a workplace of equity and respect. We are reviewing the allegations. But that wasn't the part that stunned me. It was what happened next. My LinkedIn blew up. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Coworkers. Classmates. Even a few current employees from Harper & Lennox. Most were cautious. Some were furious. A few were clearly scared. But one stood out, a short message from an internal staffer I barely knew. I read the article. "Everything you said, it's happening now to someone else. Her name is Mariah. She's scared. Can I give her your number?" My pulse quickened. I replied immediately, "Yes. Please." Mariah texted me that evening. She was a new hire, barely 3 months in. Marcus had already sidelined her from a client presentation and passed her idea off in a pitch deck to the VPs. As I read her messages, something clicked into place. This wasn't about revenge. It never really was. It was about breaking the silence Marcus depended on. And now it was happening. The whisper network was becoming a chorus. The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi," the voice said hesitantly. "Is this Dana Ruiz? I'm a producer from the Morning Exchange. We'd love to talk about featuring your story in a workplace integrity segment." I nearly dropped the phone. "Me? On national television?" "I'm not sure," I said, my voice shaking. "We don't need your full name. Just your voice. Your words. People need to hear them." That night, I sat with Mark on the couch, laptop open, watching the segment preview they emailed me. They had overlaid parts of my interview with visuals of office buildings, blurred photos of boardrooms, and snippets from the article. And then my voice came on. He thought if he erased me, that would be the end of the story. But I kept the receipts. And I'm just getting started. The first real fallout landed on a Thursday. I was sitting in a quiet corner of my favorite coffee shop, my safe spot during the chaos of the last few weeks, when my phone lit up with a message from an old colleague, Tasha. "Check the company's Glassdoor page." Now, I didn't hesitate. The site loaded slowly, like it knew what I was about to find. The most recent post, dated that morning, wasn't subtle. Some people like to play the victim after they've been fired for poor performance. Blaming others for your own failings isn't just unprofessional, it's sad. Trust the leadership at Harper and Lennox. They don't tolerate mediocrity or entitlement. It wasn't signed. Of course it wasn't. But it might as well have said, "Love Marcus." My stomach flipped. I scrolled further. There were 2 more posts, both anonymous, both parroting the same message. Lazy. Entitled. Unqualified. They didn't use my name. But everyone who knew the story would recognize the target. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. For a second, I wanted to cry. Not from hurt, at least not entirely, but from rage. From how predictable it all was. Marcus was circling the wagons, trying to control the narrative. And the company? Still silent. Still hiding behind internal reviews and vague promises. I took a deep breath, closed the site, and texted Erin. She called me immediately. "I saw it too," she said. "It's what they do when they're scared. He's lashing out because he's losing control. But what if people believe him?" I whispered, staring down at my half-finished coffee. She paused. "Let them. The people who matter? They already know. And now, so does the public." She was right. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. That night, I curled up on the couch with Mark, feeling hollow. He wrapped his arms around me and kissed my temple. "They're grasping at straws," he murmured. "You hit a nerve. That means you're doing something right." The next morning, I woke to an email from an unfamiliar address. It was short, just 1 paragraph, but it stopped me cold. "Hi, Dana. I just wanted you to know that what you did gave me the courage to speak up. I've been quiet for too long. I've seen what Marcus did, not just to you, but to others before you. I was afraid to say anything because I thought no one would believe me. Thank you for being brave. You weren't erased. You were just the beginning." A former intern. I read it 3 times, then pressed a hand to my chest as tears welled up. Not from pain this time. From relief. From validation. From knowing that the silence had finally cracked, and someone had heard me. By the following week, Erin's article had been picked up by 2 other news outlets. A workplace equity podcast invited me to speak under a pseudonym. My LinkedIn inbox filled with messages from recruiters, actual recruiters, asking if I was open to new opportunities. And then another message came. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from Elena Rivas, one of the VPs at Harper and Lennox. "Dana, I've read everything. I had no idea what was happening beneath the surface. I'm ashamed we let it get this far. If you're willing, I'd like to talk off the record, woman to woman." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't know what Elena could possibly say to make this right. I didn't know if she was genuine. But the fact that someone from the top finally reached out, it meant Marcus's fortress was crumbling. I called her the next day. We spoke for nearly an hour. She was cautious but honest. "I'm not going to make excuses," she said. "I've worked with Marcus for years. He's charming. He hides things well. But that doesn't mean I wasn't complicit by looking the other way. I didn't respond. I just listened. We're conducting an actual review now, she continued. Not just HR fluff. There's pressure coming from our board. And what about him? I asked, my voice steady. What happens to someone who climbs their way up on other people's backs? There was a pause. Let's just say, Marcus is no longer leading mentorship initiatives. That night, I opened the window in our bedroom, letting the cool spring air wash over me. For the first time since I walked out of Harper and Lennox, I felt light. Not healed, not finished, but free. And I was just getting started. I didn't hear anything official from Harper and Lennox for another 2 weeks. But during those 2 weeks, I didn't need a formal update to know something was happening. The silence was different. Intentional. The kind that lingers right before an avalanche. First, one of the department heads, Lindsay Nguyen, who had always been kind to me but distant, suddenly resigned. No announcement. Just a quiet update on LinkedIn. Moving on to a new chapter. The same day, someone from accounting DM'd me with one line. He's unraveling. Then came the big one. An internal email, meant only for staff, was leaked to Erin. She sent it to me late at night, her message short. Read this. The subject line of the leaked memo was, Leadership realignment and commitment to organizational integrity. Marcus Trent had stepped down effective immediately. No mention of wrongdoing. No apology. Just an elegant little statement about new opportunities and personal growth. But I knew better. So did everyone else. I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding in my ears. My name wasn't in it. No recognition. No justice, not publicly. But I didn't need his name on a headline anymore. I had proof. And now I had the results. Still, I felt strange. Not triumphant. Not even relieved, exactly. Just quiet. Because for all the noise Marcus had made, the chaos he caused, the people he silenced, his exit didn't come with a bang. It came with a sentence tucked between polite HR phrasing. And maybe that's what scared me most. How easy it was for someone like him to disappear without ever really being held accountable. I sat in my living room that night, staring out the window, letting that truth sink in. Mark came over, kissed the top of my head. He's gone, he said gently. I know, I replied, my voice low. But I'm not. I wasn't done, not with Marcus, not with the culture that let him thrive, and definitely not with the version of me who once thought staying quiet was the safer choice. A few days later, I was invited to speak on a panel hosted by a nonprofit focused on workplace equity and whistleblower protections. They asked me to share my experience anonymously, but I made a choice. I used my name. I told the full story. No edits. No filters. I talked about how easy it was for Marcus to manipulate perceptions. How even after doing the right thing, the cost was mine alone to carry. And how many others had probably decided to stay quiet because the risk felt too big. When the panel ended, a woman in her early 20s came up to me, her eyes wet with quiet recognition. Thank you, she whispered. I'm not brave enough yet, but maybe someday. That hit me harder than anything else. Because I'd felt that too. The loneliness, the doubt, the ache of watching someone else steal what you built, and the world applauding them for it. I walked out of that building and into the chill of the evening, shoulders square, head high. I hadn't just survived Marcus. I'd exposed him. And I wasn't done talking. Not for me. For every woman who kept the receipts, and everyone who never got the chance to. 3 months after Marcus was removed, I walked into a job interview. Not nervous, not desperate, just grounded. It was a small firm. More progressive. Startup energy but with mature leadership. They'd read the article. Knew the story. And they still asked me in. The woman across from me, Delia, their director of operations, smiled warmly as she set down my resume. I admire what you did, she said. Most people wouldn't have risked it. I gave a small shrug. I didn't feel brave at the time. I just couldn't stomach being erased. She nodded slowly, like she understood something deeper than I was saying. That's exactly why we need people like you here. I got the job. It didn't fix everything, of course. I still had moments of doubt. I still woke up sometimes with my heart pounding, Flashes of that last meeting with Marcus playing like a memory I didn't ask for. But the difference now, I knew it wasn't my fault. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't overreacting. I was telling the truth in a room full of people who didn't want to hear it. And when they forced me out, I didn't disappear. I became louder. A few weeks into the new role, something surprising happened. I got an email from HR at Harper & Lennox. It was brief. Dry. We're reaching out to formally acknowledge your contributions to the Whitestone project. Upon internal review, we have amended internal records to reflect your role in operational oversight and execution. We apologize for any previous oversight. It wasn't public. It wasn't loud. But it was something. I stared at the screen, my hands still. After everything, they finally admitted it. Not to the world, but to me. That was more than Marcus ever gave. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Meanwhile, Erin and I kept in touch. She was working on a follow-up series about silent retaliation in corporate spaces. She asked if I'd contribute again. I said yes. The more I spoke, the more people came forward. Mariah, who was still at Harper & Lennox but now in a safer role, protected by visibility. Jane, who landed a new job and started mentoring women in tech. Even Elena, the VP who'd reached out, resigned 6 months later and started her own consulting group focused on ethical leadership. What started as one voice turned into a quiet revolution. And then, almost unexpectedly, I saw Marcus again. Not in person. On my screen. Someone forwarded me his new LinkedIn profile. New title, smaller firm, vague descriptions. But the endorsements were few. The connections thinner than I remembered. He wasn't thriving. He was surviving. And I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done. He no longer lived rent-free in my head. I no longer needed to shout into the void to prove what happened. Because now, when someone looks up his name, the truth is one search away. And me? I was finally building something that couldn't be stolen. A year later, I walked into a room that looked nothing like the sleek glass offices of Harper & Lennox, and I smiled. It was mine. My name was on the door. Dana Ruiz, founder, Verity Ops Consulting. It started small. Just me and a laptop, a few local clients who'd heard about the girl who took down the guy. But it grew. People wanted transparency. Leadership teams wanted someone who understood what went wrong. Because I'd lived it. I hired carefully. Deliberately. A junior analyst. A project manager. Both women. Both brilliant. And both, at some point, had whispered to me during our interviews, "Thank you for showing there's another way." We built something different. Not just profitable. Principled. It wasn't just about project plans and timelines anymore. It was about ethics. It was about speaking up when something fell off. It was about rebuilding trust in environments where it had been quietly shattered. One afternoon, I was reviewing a proposal when I got a message from Mariah. "Thought you should see this." Attached was a screenshot. Harper & Lennox had launched a new internal leadership development program. But the name? The Ruiz Initiative. I blinked. Apparently, Elena had pitched it before she left. An initiative named not after the whistleblower who broke the company apart, but after the one who helped rebuild something better from the wreckage. Me. I laughed. Not for mockery. Just from the sheer absurdity of the full circle. And then I cried. Because for so long I had felt erased. But now, I was everywhere. I called Mark that night. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm like always. "You okay?" "I'm good," I whispered. "Really good." Another milestone? I looked around my little office. The plants in the window. The whiteboard covered in color-coded strategy maps. The team I'd built from the ground up. "More than that," I said. "It's quiet. But it's real." And maybe that's what justice looks like. Not a headline, not a courtroom, not even an apology. But a name. A door. And a woman who never let being fired be the end of her story.